Hi, welcome to Legal Nurse Podcast. I'm Pat Iyer, and today we're going to be talking to a nurse who investigated legal nurse consulting in a very deliberate way. Our podcast number 501 was our first introduction to Abby, and it's called How to Begin the LNC Journey. Today, we're catching up with Abby after she has launched her business to find out what she is doing now with her business. She's a dedicated NICU nurse. She serves attorneys through her company, Birth Injury Nurses, and she bridges that gap between medical expertise about neonatal and birth injury related issues and the law. My guest today is Abby Rogers. Abby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Let's do a quick recap about how you found out about legal nurse consulting and what you did to look into this field.
So I started looking into legal nurse consulting almost 3 years ago. I had a moment in my career where, I realized that being a bedside nurse is physically demanding. So I was kind of thinking about what else I could do, besides the bedside one day in the future. So I started Google searching like crazy, everything I could about legal nurse consulting. Came across AALNC, and I actually used the LNC locator to search for anyone's emails, phone numbers that I could talk to. So I actually sent a whole bunch of emails, and most people responded back, said, "This is what I do. I'm willing to jump on a phone call with you." So I just found the community to be so welcoming. And I got to talk to a bunch of nurses about what they were doing. Also, every chance that I had, listened to your podcast, learned so much there. Read what I could online. I read the Principles and Practice book. I was just eating everything I could that was legal nurse consulting. So.
Mm-hmm. And then did you eventually enter a program to learn more in a structured way?
So I am in my master's at Wilmington University. It's a master's in nursing leadership, and my concentration is in legal nurse consulting. I have one more class to go, and I will be completely finished. I am finished with the legal nurse consulting part of the program. So I really learned a lot there. It was very broad because the world of legal nurse consulting, there's so many different things you can do. And I just learned more about that as I go on and learn what other legal nurses are doing. My last class, we did a full mock trial, which was really interesting. We played like the part of the attorney, the jury. We did an arbitration. So I just finished that. And a big part of that was a mentorship. So I worked with an experienced legal nurse consultant, and we actually developed my business plan for next year. And so I'm just excited and ready to go.
When we talked the first time, you were in this learning process and had not yet gotten your first case. Since then, you have. Tell us about how you got that first opportunity to help an attorney.
So I did subcontract up until I got my first case. And my first behind the scenes case actually came from LinkedIn. And after I got the case, I searched for the attorney on LinkedIn, and, he wasn't very active on there, but he somehow came across my information, reached out to me and said, I have this case. I don't know what to do with it. And he confused me. I thought he was looking for an expert. I wasn't sure what he was looking for, but it was really unique opportunity because he was like, "I don't need an expert. I don't know what I need." So I got to tell him, we could do this. We could do a chronology. I got to just basically kind of talk through what kind of work products might be good for his case. And it was a great first experience.
You're making me think about a physician who came and spoke to my coaching program last night, Jeff Willis, who was a guest on Legal Nurse Podcast. And his first case was very similar, where the attorney said, I don't know if it's a case. I don't know what I need. I don't know who I need. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I should take this case. I need somebody to help me with that. It sounds like you had a similar situation with your first case.
Yes, it was great that, I had been taking in so much information on what legal nurses could do because it was almost like I was immediately put to the test. You
Mm-hmm.
know, what can you do for me? Okay, so which can be nerve-wracking when you're new and just starting out. So I was grateful to have subcontracting experience.
Well, you got that opportunity. I'm curious about your marketing because that's a big part of what you do. Tell us about how you have been able to position yourself and market your services.
So I am, as you mentioned, I am still clinically active at the bedside in the NICU. So I am balancing my business along with working in the NICU still. So that puts me in a position, and this has changed over time, but my business, my birth injury nurses, is part-time along with working at the bedside. So I felt a little overwhelmed about needing to do all kinds of marketing, and that is something that just doesn't come naturally to me as a nurse. So that's been a big learning curve. No one ever taught me marketing or business.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided I was going to throw a lot of my time into LinkedIn. So that is mainly where I market. I will say I did take initiative. I sent maybe 150 paper letters out to attorneys with my
Mm-hmm.
business card, a letter introducing myself. And what's interesting about that is that actually did come around about a year later. I had an attorney contact me from
Mm.
sending those letters. But I would say that right now my strategy is pretty much 100% LinkedIn focused.
Was he the only or she the only attorney who contacted you as a result of the letters?
As of now, yes. So, I mean, you send a lot of letters and
Mm-hmm.
maybe you only get one response, but we never know down the line. Hopefully they saved my business card, on their desk somewhere in their desk.
I had an experience in a deposition one time as an expert witness, and the opposing counsel reached down into his briefcase and pulled out the letter that I had sent to him about 7 or 8 years before and asked me if I recognized the letter. And I was shocked that he still had the letter because I sent out a total of 20 letters and he was one of them. And I had never met him in person or gotten work for him from him. And then he said, do you recognize this? And I said, you are a keeper. And he laughed and then he asked me questions about the letter and I had to explain it. It was really amazing. Took me off guard because you tend to think like I've sent it out and it's just gone into a big black hole somewhere. And if I'm going to get a response, it's going to be right away. Your situation has shown that it could be filed away in some attorney's filing system, waiting for the time. Oh, yeah, birth injury case. I got a letter from a nurse.
And interestingly, with that attorney, I probably work with them the most. And they passed my information from paralegal to paralegal. There's 3 paralegals in the office. And I'm now working with 3 attorneys out of the same office. So
Well,
never give up.
that covers the cost of the postage for those letters, Abby.
What did you say?
I said that covered the cost of the postage
Oh,
letters.
definitely. Because I did have a few letters returned back to me too. That happens too, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely worth it.
Well, we talked about LinkedIn and the attorney who contacted you through LinkedIn. Tell us about the strategy that you use when you are deciding how to use LinkedIn to gain attention.
So, in order to use LinkedIn, I would say your number one, you have to be consistent. Showing up and posting once a month or, a couple times a month, it's the algorithm is not going to work for you. I highly recommend learning more about the LinkedIn algorithm, which obviously isn't the fun side of social media, but that's basically how LinkedIn decides who sees your posts, who's going to get the chance to engage with your content. So I actually did do that. I actually took a short class about learning more about the algorithm, keywords to use so that people would see my posts, would see my page. But yes, you really, really need to be regular about it. And you need to go out there and you need to look for connections. So you need to go into LinkedIn and search for, I search for birth injury attorneys or just medical malpractice. You need to find them, ask them to connect with you. Yeah, you need to be active on the platform.
And it's helpful that you took a course. LinkedIn is in a constant state of flux, changing their approaches, their benefits that they extend to the free users, which are increasingly shrinking, pushing you to paid plans. I personally have a free plan and will probably always have a free plan. But when I'm connecting with legal nurse consultants who I'm looking for being guests on podcasts, I find multiple people who set up a profile and never post it again. And it'll say, Abby has not been active on LinkedIn lately. And that lately could have been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We know that sentence with the name Abby is not correct based on what we're talking about, but substitute in Susan, Tom, Peter, whoever. The recognition that you came to that LinkedIn is important for marketing and posting regularly means you got to figure out what to say. How do you pick your topics?
So I think that is one of the biggest hurdles for people. And for me, it was too, I was nervous to even comment on other people's posts. I was like, what am I going to say? I mean, I'm posing myself as an expert, a NICU nurse expert. I don't want to say something wrong. The biggest thing I can encourage you to do is just start responding. We are all humans on the platform. Yes, it is a professional platform, so keep it professional. But you will see people posting personal things too. And you need a good balance. You need a good balance of the content you're trying to put out there. So for me, I put out all NICU content. So it's going to be all about babies and the different diagnosis and procedures. But once in a while, you scatter a little bit of personal in there. People love to see your puppies, your dogs on LinkedIn. Attorneys post their dogs all the time. Those posts get a lot of attraction. People are looking to see that you are human. You're not just a machine feeding educational information, that you're interacting with them. When they comment on your post, you're interacting with them. So where I come up with my content, I feel like my brain needs to be not thinking about a million other things. So I will be honest and say, I come up with it when I'm walking my dog or in the shower. And I try to think very broadly because I am still working at the bedside and seeing, all kinds of different patients and diagnoses and procedures. I kind of pull from my experience. And I'm like, well, what did I do last week? Or, what meeting was I in and what did we talk about? I really do pull kind of broadly from my experiences, but then I think about how am I going to write about that? And I think you have to make sure that you are writing not on a high level. You want to bring everything down to a basic understanding. People want short posts. They want to learn something that's interesting, and then they want to move on. They don't want to read a novel on LinkedIn. So I'd say I would just get a piece of paper, and sometimes I just write right before we met today. I jotted down 2 ideas that came to me. I would say too, make sure you write them down when they come to you, because sometimes these LinkedIn ideas come in and out and they're gone.
Yeah, that's a great point, to have some type of a system where you're collecting this information and you can retrieve it, whatever that system is.
I've definitely lost a few ideas. That's such a good idea. You have to write it down. And you know what? You want to write it down because you want to save it for those days when your brain is a little bit cluttered and you don't have a great creative writing idea.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever use AI to write up your posts?
So I actually, learned along with the rest of the world about AI. I find I find that it doesn't always have my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So if I use it at all, I do not use it regularly to write my posts. But if I use it at all, it's usually after I've written a full post. I might put it in and I'll say, I'm putting this on LinkedIn. Can you help me refine it? And a lot of times it'll spit back my post, with some fancy language or something I just don't love. So then I tweak it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if I'm using it at all, it's definitely, I still feel like I have to go back and edit it because I feel like I can tell sometimes when posts are completely AI. You need to be, you need to have a good balance of keeping your voice in there.
Mm-hmm. And how frequently do you post?
So when I first started and learned all about the algorithm, I was posting 5 or 6 times a week. It was it was like a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So I have adjusted my approach, and I believe that 3 times a week is a sweet spot. It also allows me, I don't post at all on the days I'm working in the hospital. I don't have time to really look at LinkedIn on those days. Um, Weekends, sometimes I take a break. One thing I am consistent about, though, even if I'm not posting more than 3 times a week, is I'm still interacting with other people's posts. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a huge key. It's not just about throwing content out there, it's also about interacting with other people's content, which I find, you can do that. You can spend 15 minutes a day doing that. I do a lot less of other social media platforms these days.
And we know that encouraging comments is something that LinkedIn loves, and they love it when people make comments about your posts. In the days when blogging first started, it was very typical to end every blog with, "So what do you think?" Have you had a similar experience? What are your thoughts on this? Do you do something similar with LinkedIn, or do you do a different strategy to achieve some engagement on your posts?
So you bring up such an important point because, you can say, okay, here's a little bit about a NICU baby. I can put out content. And if I just kind of end it without asking a question or kind of inviting people to engage, I usually don't get as much. I don't get as much. There's not that many comments. People are like, okay, that's interesting. What what you want to do is invite them to tell you that's interesting. So I may do a lot of have you seen this type of have you seen this scenario in your legal cases or at the bedside? Because you will find, as a legal nurse posting on LinkedIn, that your audience is really other legal nurses. But keeping in mind that those legal nurses have attorney connections and so do you. So, if you're interacting with them, attorneys are going to see your posts. So you really want the engagement. The more engagement you get, the more those attorneys are going to be able to see your posts. So I would say you want to have when you write, you want to have that strong opening that kind of catches their attention. They want to read it, keep
Mm-hmm.
it brief, and then you want to have that closing statement, like you said, where you're asking some kind of a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll do like a little bit of a trivia, and all the nurses know the answers, but keeps it fun.
You said in the beginning that you were, when you were posting on LinkedIn, that you posted much more frequently, and now you're posting about 3 times a week. Do you keep records, or do you document your engagement, or do you make some decision about looking at the results of what happens when you post?
I do. So I always post in the morning, early in the morning, keeping in mind that we're all in different time zones, but I post my early morning. That way I have a little time in the morning to engage with people commenting early. So if within a few hours, if I haven't gotten a lot of engagement, it probably means the post is not going to go very far. So I'll actually take it down. A lot of times I'll save it though, because I put a lot of time into writing it. So I'll save it and kind of store it away and look back to see later if I could modify it, if it's going to work out or if it's something I'm just going to scrap. But I do look at that. I do, if people aren't posting kind of early on in the day, if it's just sitting there and not a lot of impressions have happened, then people probably aren't going to see it. So that can actually hurt you the next time you post if your prior post didn't do well. So sometimes you just have to take them down. So I do pay attention to my engagement. I try not to obsess over it though, because what's important is putting posts out there that people are going to see. So I feel like I have shifted a little bit from really focusing on every single impression that I got to reining it in and just trying to be consistent, which has paid off.
An aspect of engagement could drive the obsessive compulsives crazy, couldn't it?
Yes, there's enough analytics on there that you could really start studying.
And I'm thinking about these poor rejected posts that are probably sitting in a file called dead. Poor performers. What do you label them?
Half the time I'm on the go. So they're saved into my notes in my phone. So I actually I save them into my notes because, I don't want to wait till I'm home to take that post down. It's coming down. So, so a lot of times I'll copy what's in the post and I'll save it right into my notes in my phone. So when I am trying to think of new posts and I'm really struggling with ideas, I will scroll back through my notes and see if there's anything there that I can modify and use again. And I have had a few that I've used a couple times and a couple times they just didn't go over. So I may just delete that and, not save it at all. Can't get too attached. Just have to keep going, keep writing.
I put a post up last month about how when I was 6 years old, I got a balloon from the car dealer. It was a helium balloon. And my parents said, don't let go of the string. Don't let go of the string. It'll float away. Don't let go of the string. So, of course, my little hand opened up and the string went flying up. And I wrote this post and was making a point about watching your dreams and keeping track of your dreams. And I thought it was just the cutest post. And I got this great little image of a girl with red hair, which I used on Dreamlab and Canva. I think there was maybe one comment on it, or it just like it fell like that balloon, that helium balloon rose. Well, this post was just dead on arrival. And I realized that I couldn't have any attachment to the post because even though I thought it was really clever, it didn't resonate with the people who were reading it.
No, yeah. And sometimes LinkedIn catches on to keywords, I think, and just doesn't send it out there. Just doesn't send it out there for people to see.
Maybe it had.
But I think that if you spend a lot of time writing and that keeps happening to you, it's easy to give up. And that has happened to me many times. Definitely has. And it can be frustrating when you have had, a post with hundreds or thousands of impressions one week, and then you have a week of just not much happening. So that's why I think adjusting the approach from 5 days a week to 3 was a little bit better. Kind of taking the time to put a lot of thought into the 3 posts, deciding what people really want to see is better than kind of just spitting them out, 5 or 6 of them in a week.
And now that I think about it, Abby, the person who did post on my post was a person who sold medical gases to hospitals. So it must have been the keyword helium that got his attention.
LinkedIn is really funny that way.
Oh. I know that our listeners are going to be curious about the services that you offer. how you can help them in their practices, whether they're the attorneys who listen to this podcast or legal nurse consultants who might be looking for expert witnesses or subcontractors. What would be the best way for them to contact you?
So you can find all my contact information on my website, which is birthinjurynurses.com. My email address, which is arogers, ROGERS, at birthinjurynurses.com.
All very easy to spell, Abby. You certainly lucked out on that one, at least on your name.
And you can connect to my LinkedIn through my website. So
let's just pause because I stepped on your answer there. Those are all easy words to spell, Abby. Rogers and birthinjurynurses.com.
And you can go on my website and you can connect to my LinkedIn from there too.
Perfect. Any last bit of advice to anyone who's considering using LinkedIn as their primary method of marketing?
I would say learn a little bit about the algorithm, not the fun part of things, but definitely learn a little bit about what's going to work there. And then just get brave. Just show up, start writing, start putting content out there. Don't worry if it falls flat. Just keep trying and make sure you're engaging with other people's content.
A great summary for the strategies that Abby has successfully used and is using on a weekly basis as she develops her content, shares it with people, and is visible on LinkedIn. What makes your strategy so unique, Abby, is that you are building on your expertise. If I can switch into coach mode for a moment, instead of being on LinkedIn saying, hey, have you ever heard of a legal nurse consultant? Do you know what we can do to help you? Those posts don't provide any value to the attorney. But when you are faced with a case of a child who has an anoxic brain injury associated with birth, and I'm thinking about a case that I worked on involving a child who was at Children's Hospital for 2 years on a ventilator after being propelled into the mother's abdomen through a ruptured uterus and lost blood supply and oxygen supply. That case had enormous damages from the standpoint of what happened to this child and the family that was torn apart by this experience. Those are pretty obvious. The damages are obvious and the causation is obvious, but there are other birth injuries where the labor and delivery staff are on the hook over something that happened in the first trimester and it had nothing to do with what happened in the last few hours of that child's in utero existence, where that becomes a critical factor to look at. Thank you, Abby, for being a guest on Legal Nurse Podcast. I want to thank you who's been watching this on Legal Nurse Business, on our YouTube channel, or on our website, podcast.legalnursebusiness.com. We have both an audio and a video version of this podcast, and I encourage you to check both of them out. Come back next week to meet a new guest and stay on just another couple of minutes to find out who's coming up next. I'll see you on the next Legal Nurse Podcast.